Haywood Highsmith is back, but is that a good thing for the Miami Heat? And Kel'el Ware had a strong showing in Summer League, but is that enough to have earned a starting role? And what did Kevin Love have to say about the upcoming season? You'll find out in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, you are Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, Monday to Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil, both of us credentialed Heat media members. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everybody every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll talk about Kel'el Ware's impressive Game 2 in Summer League, plus Kevin Love talks about his evolving role with the Heat going into next season. But first, the Heat are bringing back Haywood Highsmith on a 2-year, $11 million deal, no options on it. The Heat's roster is at 14 players, and with very little room under the second apron, it looks like we're done here. The Heat are done signing players. We'll talk a little bit about what else the Heat could do here in a second, but in regards to Haywood Highsmith, what do you think about him coming back, David?
Well, I mentioned in yesterday's episode, I thought it was a priority for them with the loss of Caleb Martin. You look at maintaining the kind of continuity that they have over last year. A 2-year deal makes a lot of sense because you're talking about not just this year, which could possibly be a last dance for the current core of the group that includes Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler Hero. And if you're looking at it from that perspective, he's able to kind of breach that gap, similar to what we saw with Kevin Love, who we'll talk about later, like another 2-year contract. You can go through this season, go as far as you possibly can, go all in this year, and then whatever happens in the next offseason, you deal with that as it comes, but you at least have something to kind of build around and to maintain. Maybe not build around, because it's not like Haywood or Kevin Love at this point in his career are core type players, but they help maintain Heat culture. They help maintain the continuity so that there doesn't feel like a significant drop off from one season to the next, because I think that's the potential vision for this group, is that next offseason, should Jimmy decide to opt out and should he seek a contract elsewhere, then you have to enter the next phase of kind of retooling and rebuilding this roster. And it helps to have quality role players that are steady, intelligent, high IQ, familiar with the system, etc. So I love it. I think it's great. You know, on a personal note, we like Haywood. We like what he brings to the table. It's a good, friendly amount. I think we had talked about when we had Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype on the show to talk about his interview with Haywood Highsmith from about a month ago. You know, Haywood was seeking a lot of money, seeking more per year than he got over the course of 2 seasons with Miami in terms of this contract. So I think it's a really great deal for Miami, and I think it helps Haywood stay in Miami, continue to build and develop here in South Florida, and have I think a clear role as well.
So he played 20 minutes a game last year. He's going to play more. He's going to basically, with Caleb Martin gone, he's going to be relied on a lot more. And by the way, that was sort of the original vision with Haywood Highsmith. It was, if we lose Caleb Martin, he kind of backfills that sort of two-way forward spot for us. And then he impressed so much last year, shot 40% from 3, albeit not on a ton of volume, but much better than what it was 2 years ago. And elite level defense, and I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that, a perimeter defense. So I thought he was way more impressive, developed kind of faster than maybe they thought, and like you were mentioning before, it seemed like the Heat might have been priced out of not just Caleb Martin, but also Haywood Highsmith. So the guy that was supposed to replace Caleb Martin, they were at risk of losing him too. Now, interestingly enough, because of all the movement this offseason, it didn't really look like that offer was ever out there for Highsmith, right? Barry Jackson reported that the Milwaukee Bucks were trying to get Highsmith. They only had a veteran minimum contract that they were able to offer. Damian Lillard called Haywood, trying to convince him to come. Well,
Phoenix Suns, too.
The Phoenix Suns wanted him, which makes a lot of sense for their roster. And I had heard, by the way, that the Suns were very interested in Haywood Highsmith, but they're very similar, can only offer the veteran minimum. Miami was able to offer basically an annual average value of $5.5 million a year, 2 years, $11 million. So it's a better offer, and it's where Haywood wants to be. He's been very open about he would like to continue his career in Miami, that he has found a home here. He's comfortable here, and he likes the role, and he likes everything that's going on over here. So he gets kind of what he wants in terms of getting to stay in Miami, although I guess maybe a little disappointing that the money wasn't out there. And that's why I mentioned no option. Is I was wondering if maybe he would have negotiated or tried to negotiate a player option on that second year, bet on himself for a season, and then kind of run it back in free agency next year, see if that money's out there. But you know what? 2 years from now, same sort of deal. 2 years in Miami, and then maybe 2 summers from now, enters free agency and maybe has an opportunity to make a little bit more money. But immensely important that he's back. He is Miami's best perimeter defender when Jimmy Butler isn't going full tilt playoff Jimmy mode. He's going to be very much needed on the roster. And with Caleb gone, I think he's the guy that basically plays. I think I slot him in as a backup power forward, but he could also be. I don't know that the position necessarily matters, but he's not. I don't know that he's going to start unless there's something up Eric Spoelstra's sleeve where he says, you know what, we're going to play Haywood at the 2 or something on the perimeter next to Jimmy, with a different kind of lineup and go with either Terry Rozier or Tyler Hero starting at point guard or something like that. But unless something weird like that happens, if he's basically playing the same sort of role he's played over the last couple of years, backup forward, who could potentially close games when the Heat need defense at the end of games, that's going to be his role.
Yeah, as far as position, I kind of want to save that conversation, put a pin on it a little bit as we get into the discussion with Kevin Love a little bit, because I think there are some fans that are a little concerned about how the roster is shaping up, and perhaps legitimate concerns, but I have a theory that I'd like to kind of save on that. Other than that, though, I think as far as Haywood is concerned, like I think it's a great point. I think he's going to continue to develop. The 2 years gives him an opportunity. He's 27 now, so he'll be 29. Kind of what's viewed around the league as entering your prime. So if he continues to develop, has an increased role, shows out over the next 2 seasons, he's probably due for a big payday, whether it's in Miami or elsewhere. And who knows what Miami's salary cap situation will look like in 2 years. I guess you're probably looking at having to re-sign Jaime Jaquez at that point or offer him his rookie extension. Nikola Jovic is probably going to be somewhere in that same boat as well, unless they address it the season before. So, you know, there's an opportunity for him to stay here in Miami, but if not, he has an opportunity to look for that bigger deal elsewhere around the NBA. And maybe by then, more GMs will have a little bit more of a firm understanding of what the CBA implies and whether they can kind of work their way around some of the restrictions that are in place there, and maybe they'll have a little bit more money available. I can't help but be surprised. Like, I know we'll get some kind of negative feedback saying, oh, Miami basically outbid against themselves. Maybe that's right to a degree, but I think it's also important to kind of do right by your guys. And for some people who said, you know what, it's no big deal if they lose Caleb and Haywood, I think it is. Like, you have to have at least guys that are proven. I know that they're both undrafted, et cetera, and that Caleb, you know, was able to kind of parlay that into a nice deal with Philadelphia, albeit less than the one he wanted. For Haywood, same thing. He got a good deal, not the one he wanted. But you have, like, it took them years to get to this point. You know, it took them a couple seasons. Like, you look at Haywood, he was with Philadelphia for a while. Then he came to Miami. He has to continue to
playing in Germany for a year or something. I mean, but to your point, they are Haywood Highsmith is a proven NBA player. Even if that money wasn't out there, we know what he can do. He could play elite level defense and he can knock down open threes. As much as people like a Keyshawn Johnson or whatever it is, we have no idea if that guy could play at an NBA level. We have no clue. Yeah. We have had 2 summer league games. That's it. So it's important to have.
Give me the guy who's got minutes in the NBA Finals. You know, and the guy who's actually played at a high level in the NBA Finals for a small amount of time.
Yeah, but the Heat have 14. Now there are 14 players under contract. They can carry a max of 15 guys onto the standard roster. That's not going to happen unless something changes dramatically with the roster. What we're looking at is right now, I think the 14 going into training camp. Again, there's 3 months between now and training camp basically starting here. Maybe a trade happens. We've seen late in the offseason trades, but if there isn't a trade, barring something unforeseen, this is the group. This is the group. 14 players under contract, no room to add a 15th player under that second apron. The only thing preventing them from doing that is going over the second apron, and because of all the things that the limitations from a roster construction standpoint, I doubt that is something that they're going to do. Really, the only movement I can see happening, the 2-way contracts right now, Zion pulling, Drew Smith, Keyshawn Johnson. Those could be swapped out whenever you want with no sort of penalties against the cap. You could kind of just do that. The Heat still have Alondis Williams and Cole Swider as sort of restricted free agents. That hasn't exactly been resolved.
No.
Probably through Summer League. The Heat have 3 two-way contracts available. Those 3 contracts will probably go to 3 of those 5 guys that I just mentioned, right? Just because Pullen, Smith, and Johnson are there doesn't mean they're going to finish there. So that might be the next bit of movement, right, that we're talking about here. And that's really it. And, yeah, you can't even really bring up one of those undrafted rookies onto the 15-man roster. There's just not enough space. They are pennies, below the second apron. So that's where they're at.
I've seen estimates like just over $1 million. So that's a possibility of maybe bringing somebody in like what would be a prorated amount. Like we've seen the
like
Heat
in
kind of
February or March, depending on how the math works out. Yeah, I mean,
like Dwayne Dedman, yeah.
And you do something like the Heat have done in the past where you bring somebody on a prorated amount plus another year. So you kind of get them on the cheap, and maybe that's something that happens. But that is such a conversation for so much later. But yeah, that's, to your point, essentially what the Heat are limited to. The other thing, too, all 14 guys, guaranteed contracts. Yeah. So the opportunity to waive one and buy and pick somebody out on the buyout, not going to be there the way it's been there the last couple of years. So they opted not to go in that direction, right? So they could still obviously add somebody to a prorated minimum, but if it's a veteran, like that veteran minimum for a player that's been in the league 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years is so much more than an undrafted rookie that even that becomes really, really difficult. So being a buyout trade might not be. I think that the Heat, I don't expect anything.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think the Heat are looking at this roster and being like, we're done making phone calls. My impression is that the Heat are still out there looking. And even if nothing out, like the Lowry Markkanen thing's not going to happen, like that stuff, DeMar DeRozan obviously ends up in Sacramento, but it doesn't mean something can't shake loose between now and the start of the season. I think the Heat will be, or at least try to be opportunistic. But I also think that we're probably only a few days away, months away, weeks away, whatever it is, from them sort of signaling out to the media, we like our team. We think we got a chance if we could stay healthy. Sky's the limit for us. But we don't. I'm
just thinking like in terms of like addressing an area of need, like obviously the point guard position I think is still one that's a little deficient. Bringing in Drew Smith is one thing, but you're looking at Terry Rozier basically handling the ball as much as possible. Perhaps Jimmy, perhaps Tyler.
Yep, Tyler will do some. Alec Burks can definitely handle the ball a little bit. You got Zion Pullen, you got Drew Smith. It's kind of going to be by Jaime Jaquez can handle the ball a little bit. It's going to be by committee. Maybe Jovic plays some point forward. That's sort of where we're at, right? The Heat had opportunities to add a backup point guard, and they looked at it and they said, nope, we'd rather bring back Kevin Love. Nope, we'd rather bring back Highsmith. Nope, we'd rather bring back Thomas Bryant. They just said, they felt like they didn't need a backup point guard. And you know what? I'm okay with that in today's NBA. You have one, you got Rozier, and you got a bunch of other guys that can handle the ball a little bit, who aren't as limited as a smaller point guard. So I think I'm okay with it. Kel'el Ware looked much better in his second Summer League game. We talk about what we liked. Plus, Kevin Love discussing a potentially new role next season. All of that and more coming up on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, it's so easy, especially nowadays. Look at Florida. Like you see somebody pulling up the intersection, they got this great car, right? Or maybe you're passing by the intersection and they got the, something that you want, But that reminds me of an expression that I've always taken to heart. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's so easy to enjoy or envy other people's lives, and it might take away from your own enjoyment. But you know what? If you're tired of feeling that way, of like always wanting what somebody else has, then maybe therapy could help you focus on what you want instead of worrying about what other people have that might be different than yours. And if that's the case, you're looking to start therapy, then give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, super convenient, made for your schedule. It's super flexible. You just go fill out a questionnaire, couple minutes. Next thing you know, you're matched up with a licensed therapist that can help you right away. If you need to switch your schedule for whatever reason, done. No charge, no nothing. Can be done just as easily as anything else. So stop comparing and start focusing on yourself with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today. You get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Miami Heat talk every day, 5 days a week, even during the off season. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. Kel'el Ware, Miami's first-round pick, dominant performance Sunday in his second Summer League game. 26 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block. David doing most of his work as a rim roller. And you and I got on here after the Saturday game, Sunday morning, before the Sunday game. And one of the things I pointed out about Ware, and the thing that gave me pause while watching the tape of him at Indiana was, boy, this guy likes to post up early in the shot clock. A lot. Yeah. And I know he's 7 feet tall, and I know he's athletic, and I know he could jump, and I know all these things. But he doesn't really play like it all the time. He sort of plays like a poor man's LaMarcus Aldridge. Just doing a bad impression of LaMarcus Aldridge way too much for my liking in today's NBA. And I saw that a lot in his first game on Saturday, and I pointed it out again. Why does this guy keep wanting to post up and play this finesse game? And the Heat coaches saw the same thing I saw. And they said, and they told him going into game 2 in that second Summer League game at the California Classic in San Francisco, said, hey, enough with that, dude. You're 7 feet tall. You could sprint, you could jump. Do that towards the basket. Set a solid screen, high screen, and then just roll to the rim and make yourself available. And that's exactly what he did on Sunday. The Heat won their second Summer League game. Kel'el Ware, 26 points, absolutely dominant. I love what I saw from Kel'el Ware in that game. What did you like?
I enjoyed it as well. I think we kind of have to pump the brakes a little bit in terms of like projecting for next year. Because one, it's Summer League. It's the Sacramento Kings Summer League team. They played poorly defensively, I think, overall. But they also, one of the things that I saw that were able to unlock him was something I pointed out in that same episode, that he kind of relies heavily on guard play. And you look at what Isaiah Stevens was able to do, like getting him, I think he finished with 7 assists, like getting him those looks at the rim, being able to kind of set things up. And I think that's where he's going to be able to flourish best, to be able to roll to the rim, get those good looks, and just be able to say, you know what? I forgot. I'm taller than everybody. I could just finish easily in traffic. I could just dunk over people because I'm 7 feet, a legitimate 7 feet tall. So I liked what we saw in him, but I also kind of drove home the point, and maybe I'm being a little negative, that he does kind of heavily rely on somebody else for now. I'm not saying that's going to be the end all of his career.
Isn't that okay, though? He's a
yes.
center. I would rather him rely on the guard play than go in there and start doing that post-up stuff, right? In isolation. Like, that's not what you want out of that position. You want a guy that can finish. He's a play finisher, not a play starter. Yeah.
But I just wonder how much that's going to translate at the NBA level also. Like, I think it'll still be there. I think the way pick and roll offense kind of dominates the league nowadays, you kind of have to stick to the guard. Especially a guy like Terry. If you don't, you say you don't double on Terry as he's driving. That's so, for theory's sake here. It's Terry Rozier with the ball, maybe Tyler, maybe Drew Smith. I don't know. Let's see. They're driving to the rim. They've got the ball in their hands. They're probably going to command that double, and they're going to have to be able to find a cutting Ware to the basket. I just think that's how you have to. You have to play the ball handler more often than not. You can't just hang back and be able to.
But
defend.
even if you don't double him. He's 7 feet tall.
If you don't double him, yeah.
If you could still just lob it up to him, right? If you don't double the ball handler, that's the whole idea, is that he's bigger than everybody. Or most everybody. And so
most everybody.
And that's what I actually like about it too. That, like, if he was gonna try to keep posting up and score a bunch of points in a flashy way like that in the Summer League, I'd be like, well, what are you doing that for? Because nobody's gonna let you do that in the NBA. You don't get to dribble 6 times when you're on the court with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier. That's not gonna happen for you. You know what you are gonna be able to do? Finish lobs, set screens. And I thought he was actually a really committed screen setter in that game. He did a really good job. It wasn't just screening for the sake of screening. He was doing it hard, and he was getting to the basket quick. And I liked all that. I really liked what I saw from him in that way. But and people might say, well, he's not going to get that many opportunities. He's not going to get 12 shots every game to score 26 points. I'm like, I don't care. That's not what I care about. Because that pick and roll stuff is easily scalable one way or the other. You could scale that down where he's only doing it a few times per game, or maybe he's only finishing a few plays per game. You could easily scale it up if there's an opportunity against a certain matchup where you say, okay, he's got it going. This is our offense for the night. That's the exact role he has to play. He hasn't been shooting as many threes. I actually thought he passed up a bunch of threes in that second game. And again, I was okay with it because his bread and butter is not going to be the three-point stuff. It's going to be the vertical spacing that he provides, not necessarily the floor spacing. But I think once he's on the court with Jimmy and Bam more, there'll be more opportunities for him to read the floor and say, you know what, I probably should pop instead of roll here. That's just sort of the way that the geometry of the floor is going to work.
He went 12 of 21 from the floor, 57%. But he did also take 2 3-pointers. You take those away, and he finished at 63%. That's
perfect. It's right where you want it, right?
If he goes 63% on like 9 attempts, 8 attempts, that's still going 5 of 8, 6 of 8, 10 points off the bench in theory. What about the possibility of him starting? Because I think a lot of people are, again, kind of...
Before we get to that, we need to talk about it, but just a couple more stats from the game. The screen assist stuff was there for him too, which I just wanted to point out. Where
they keep track of that in Summer League?
They do, man. It's the NBA. They keep it. He had 2 screen assists on Saturday, 7 on Sunday, because he was that much more committed as a screener. The other thing I like too, when he got the ball, he wasn't tunnel vision, right? He got the ball and he was very willing to go to put his back into somebody, screen him off, and then go into a dribble handoff, flow into a dribble handoff action or something like that. Yeah. Willing to move the ball too, right? 3 assists. He had 0 on Saturday, where it was a little bit of a black hole, right? The ball went to him, and then he went to his bad LaMarcus Aldridge impression, and then he mostly missed it. So it was night and day. And I think when the coaches sit down with him and review the film from the Sunday game, they're going to say, hey, man, that was a test. You aced it. Do that for the next 3 years of your NBA career. You'll be just fine. And eventually we'll let you do the little Marcus Aldridge stuff. But right now, this is your job. That's your job. And look what happened. You scored 26 freaking points. So what's there to complain about? You know what I mean? The rebounds, I also thought the shot blocking was better too. I thought, just as a note, after the last show, I said he was very jumpy after that first game.
Not as much.
Not as jumpy. So that was the last note. Is Kel'el Ware going to start? I think it's a great question. And I think Kevin Love addressed it a little bit too. He revealed some news about how he might be used next season, which might mean something for how Kel'el Ware is going to be used next season. We'll talk about all of that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We love sports. We love them so much that we never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have wound down, and now you're kind of just stuck with very little sports, you know what? It's not so easy. There's just fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing the way you want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want, because all you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Let us know in the comments section what you thought about Kel'el Ware's impressive second Summer League game and whether or not he should start for the Miami Heat. Also, you can follow us on your favorite podcast app. 5-star ratings and reviews, always appreciated. You wanted to ask the question whether or not you think Kel'el Ware should start. Is that based on basically what you've seen in the Summer League so far?
No, I just think a lot of people are kind of rushing to the conclusion that, oh, you know what, he's going to be available, that he's going to be providing a dimension that Miami has lacked in years past. Is he going to be, 26 points isn't anything to sneer at. And given the fact that he does have a dynamic of size that is currently missing from Miami's roster, is he a candidate to start and play alongside Bam Adebayo? And I don't think so. I don't think we're at that point. I don't know that we'd see anything from Summer League that would change Eric Spoelstra and the coaching staff and the front office's view of Kel'el Ware. Like, as good as he might be, now is not the time. Whatever he does in Summer League is going to be great, but it's the work that he puts in. And I said this before, and I think this is the case. It's the work he's going to have to put in between now, Vegas, and training camp, where he's going to be able to earn minutes. But as a starter, I just think that we need to pump the brakes a little bit. We kind of, I think a lot of Heat fans are kind of so desperate for something new, something different from last season. And as much of a spark as Ware might provide, starting is probably not a realistic option.
Derek Lively was sort of his best case scenario comp going into his rookie year. Even Lively didn't start over Daniel Gafford in a lot of games. So, and that
was after the acquisition of Gafford. Even before that, he didn't start.
Right. He was still backing up different guys, but and that's without, like Bam Adebayo is a top 3 center in the NBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
As good as Gafford is, he ain't that. So kind of having to push Bam off of that 5 spot, that starting 5 spot, requires a few different things. Nikola Jovic, by the way, what do we do? What are we doing? Just benching him without any competition? Kel'el Ware just got here. Nikola Jovic has been here and going into his 3rd year now. And I thought last year's leap was sort of just priming him for a much more substantial leap. If you can get on FanDuel right now, I don't know if there's most improved player odds out there. Nikola Jovic seems like a pretty good early bet if you wanted to just sprinkle some money on that, if that's even available. So what do we do? Just benching him? The guy was awesome last year, especially towards the end of the season. Has some playoff experience. Yeah. So I'm with you. I think we don't want to rush the Kel'el Ware thing where it's like, okay, we got to start him. That said, I wouldn't rule it out. I think it would be very surprising to make that prediction right now based off of one bad Summer League game and one good Summer League game. But to your point, too, he'll show a lot more during Summer League. And what will really figure out how things stand is at training camp when he's going up against Bam and Jimmy and Nico and Haywood and Jaime and all these other guys to see, okay, what does this guy look like? Because the one thing he has that nobody else on the roster has is 7 feet tall. Nobody else on the roster is that. And so if the Heat really feel like they need that in the starting lineup, then you put it in the starting lineup and you just sort of figure it out later. I'd also say, hey, if the Heat, we kind of keep looking at this as a last dance. What are the real expectations for this team? Like the real ones, not the ones that they tell people. The real expectations for this team. Is it to win a championship? I don't know. If this team determines we think Jimmy's going to opt out after a year and we really got to lean into what the vision looks like post Jimmy, then maybe they do say, you know what, we need Bam at the 4, which means we need Kel'el at the 5. And maybe they think Bam is just going to be better off at the 4 full time. But we might as well do this part now.
Yep.
Because you got a chance to ask Kevin Love about what his role is going to be next season and if he's going to be able to play the 4 next to Bam at the 5 more often. And this is what he had to say.
Welcome back and congratulations. But you kind of hinted at it earlier. Do you see that there's going to be an evolution in your role or a change back to maybe playing more spots at the forward? Because obviously you spent most of your time as center backing up Bam, but now with the addition of Kel'el Ware and others, do you think that maybe you might be able to return a little bit more to that role? I know you can't really speak on it too much, but do you think that that's a possibility in the future?
I think so, because Kel'el, you see it that he's, so agile and, able to move so well. And the way I saw him, run the 4 in that first game was very impressive. I think that there is room to operate within that space. I think naturally you guys have seen within our zone, but certainly in our man-to-man offense, that we, I operate better at guarding a 5. I think that at this stage in my career that is the case, and being able to play high-low or being able to space the floor while a traditional 5 operates within the paint is something that I can add high value to. So I think it's something that's there. I'm sure it's something that we'll toy with and see in training camp, but I think it could be something that is what could happen this year.
Some interesting stuff. You asked him about his role. He immediately goes into Kel'el Ware and starts beaming about how that guy, about his sizes and his rim rolling potential there. What did you think of Kevin Love's response to your question?
Well, he kind of had, like I said, he had talked about it a little bit before. I just think to kind of tie it all together.
Yeah.
Everybody's concerned with like Thomas Bryant, right? Like, oh, it's so head scratching. Like the idea that you would go after Haywood, and from the reporting from Barry Jackson is that Miami wasn't really interested in re-signing Haywood, which is a little surprising, but that they kind of circled back over the last couple of days after DeMar DeRozan chose Sacramento instead of Miami. And so they said, you know what, we kind of have to fill out the roster. Let's come back and bring H to the fold. And if that's the case, then why did you go out of the way to extend or just re-sign Thomas Bryant? And my thought is that they are making this kind of cultural shift, that you're signing Thomas Bryant as your backup 5, but your backup 5 to Kel'el Ware. And I think the Kevin Love addition then is to back up Bam Adebayo at the 4. I think they're starting to make that transition, and that's why it seems like a wasteful re-signing. But if you look at him as not as a third center on the roster, but basically your second center in most situations, then it makes a lot more sense to bring a guy like Bryant back, who again has 1 year now with the Heat system and can provide some floor spacing and can provide size and things of that sort. So I just think they're kind of making this shift slowly, subtly, and at the same time, it doesn't look like it doesn't feel on paper like, the kind of major change. It's not like you're adding a clear all-stars positional, fit like a power forward or a center to kind of signify this. But I think you just kind of have to make that subtle adjustment where you say, you know what, we're bringing in centers now because our center in the past 5 seasons isn't going to be the center anymore. Yeah.
And this is the theory that you were hinting at before, I would imagine, right? And so
yeah.
I'm glad you brought this up because I was sort of thinking the same thing. It's why do they have 4 centers on the roster? Well, maybe they don't. Maybe they have 3, right? Maybe it's Kel'el Ware, Kevin Love, and Thomas Bryant. And
not Kevin Love so much. Not so much Kevin Love.
Well, whatever. Like Kevin Love plays with Bam, whatever it is. But the idea is that he wouldn't be backing up Bam so much as maybe playing with Bam sometimes, the way that he was talking about there too, right? So does that make Bam the power forward? And if that makes Bam the power forward, then who's the backup power forward? Is that Nikola Jovic? And to your point, like what's the vision now with Haywood Highsmith?
Yeah.
Can he what different positions can he play? I think that's fair. Maybe you move him more to a perimeter-oriented position. I don't know what the starting lineup is going to be for the Heat. I wouldn't rule anything out with Erik Spoelstra because you know what? I think Heat fans are sick of running it back for this umpteenth time now. I bet Erik Spoelstra's a little sick of running it back too. That guy is so creative where he's like, I just need more stuff to play with. I need more toys, more tools, more options, more stuff because I just haven't had that many options over the last couple of years. And if anything, I'm losing options with guys like Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent, and Max Strus leaving. So how can I change it? How can I evolve? Because Erik Spoelstra is never going to do the same thing twice. We know that about him. And so maybe he's sitting there like, I'm done. It's time to move Bam to the 4. He's ready for it. And the way that Udonis Haslem is talking, the way that Kevin Love is talking, it feels like that might have been a conversation internally. The way that Bam's talking. Yeah. Maybe there's been some sort of communication gone out from the coaching staff. We want to play Bam at the 4 more. And everything they've done this offseason and everything that people have said sort of indicates that we're heading in that direction. I suppose the only question is, at what point does that take hold? Is it something that they start games with, or is it something that they just play a bunch of minutes during the game with? Those are the only other questions. But I think I think we're headed towards a year, no question, that Bam's going to be playing power forward much more often than he has in previous points in his career.
Yeah, I think it's fair. It's surprising, right? But at the same time, the point that he made, that he made in the interview was, that he wants to also help preserve Bam. Like Bam's talked about it. Right. We've talked about it on the show. The idea that Bam said after the finals, I mean, he was exhausted, and last year having to play as much, especially with Jimmy missing time and Tyler missing time, trying to be the one mainstay in the lineup, that takes a lot out of you. And if you want him to be more effective as he makes that kind of slow, gradual progression towards being the best version of himself in the playoffs, then you kind of have to let him kind of chill a little bit, maybe not go up against these bigger bodies and things of that sort. So yeah, I think it's great. It's great to see. Obviously, we're kind of all it's very subjective here, and we have to see much more improvement from him when it comes to his shooting. Right, that you cannot kill floor spacing so dramatically, but. I think at this point in time, though, that it's certainly an option. Like I'm like, even as we're talking about this, and you bring up the idea of not knowing what the starting lineup is, there's so many different options.
Mm-hmm.
I know it doesn't feel like maybe you added more tools to the toolbox, but now having a legit 7-footer there, if you want to try them out there, as such and put him on the starting lineup. I mean, you could go with Jimmy at the point. You can go with Jovic, possibly at the point with Jimmy and kind of Duncan.
I mean, that seems strong. But I will say this. Them not signing a backup point guard begs the question, what's the plan when Terry Rozier is not on the court? And my guess, and understanding also that Josh Richardson, depending on how the shoulder surgery and rehab goes, might not be ready to start the season.
Yeah.
My guess is that Tyler Hero is going to be their quote-unquote backup point guard. That does not necessarily mean that Hero is going to come off the bench, but I don't know that the Heat are sold on Rozier and Hero as a starting backcourt. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
So maybe Hero does come off the bench. I don't know. But I think you have to stagger their minutes somehow, Rozier and Hero, because as much as like Duncan Robinson has improved on the ball, as much as Jaime has shown as a rookie, even Nico, it still feels like you need one of Rozier or Hero on the court basically at all times. And so that kind of begs some different kinds of questions of what that starting lineup could look like. Let's say they do make Hero sort of their sixth man again, the way that Udonis Haslem spoke about on First Take. Does Rozier start with Duncan Robinson in the backcourt for spacing purposes with Jimmy, Bam, and Kel'el Ware? You know, like I'm just saying, I don't think that Spo has made a decision, but I do think the addition of Ware, I think them bringing back Thomas Bryant over Orlando Robinson, Bryant who legitimately can shoot threes, even though he didn't do that much. He only made 4 3-pointers all of last year.
We should report also, if you don't know by now, Orlando Robinson waived Sunday afternoon after we had recorded. So this is the first show after being waived.
So them picking Bryant over Orlando Robinson, like if they look at their 3 centers as Ware, Kevin Love, and Thomas Bryant, those are 3 centers who can shoot the 3. Right? And so everything just sort of points in that direction again. I just wonder if we're going to see it starting. I'm not ruling it out. I would be a little bit surprised if they started a rookie like Kel'el Ware, but I also wonder are the Heat just looking at this and like, what else do we have to lose? Let's just do it, you know?
Right.
Like at least this is something different, right?
Yeah.
If it works, it works. The Mavericks just got to the finals with Derek Lively basically playing starters minutes. Yeah. You know, like it's not out of the realm of possibility, I don't think. But we'll talk about this a whole lot more as Summer League goes on. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on your favorite podcast app.